The previous episode of Snowfall was all about mourning, regret, and survival. Some saints were coping better than others with Jerome's passing, while the rest were still in grief. Franklin was saddened by the loss, but he carried on because there was still work to do and he could not afford to get distracted. Louis was devastated, but her mind was fixed on getting revenge. Sissy and Leon, among others, were also deeply touched by Jerome's passing, but if anything, it only made them long for peace in their own worlds. In the previous week's episode, Franklin and Gustavo also made progress toward starting their strategy to eliminate Teddy, while Louis left us a bit confused about who she will side with between Teddy and Franklin. Teddy and Franklin have been playing a game of cat and mouse where each of them wants to kill the other. Gustavo ends up being the deciding factor for who will be the winner between the two in the latest episode, as the two fierce rivals finally get their hands on one another. During Jerome's repast, Gustavo meets with Franklin to discuss the plan for taking Teddy down. Tomorrow is the big day, and Gustavo tells Franklin he's ready. However, he needs a favor from Franklin concerning the Saint plane. Franklin walks Gustavo out of the Saint family home as he gives him the money and passports Gustavo requested for his family. At the repast, Louis also confronts Franklin about their earlier discussion of her intent to help in his plot against Teddy. He openly told her that he needed her assistance in order for his plan to work. She reluctantly joins forces with Franklin, but makes it clear that she is only doing it to free herself from Teddy. It's obvious that neither of them wants to work with the other, but for the first time all season, Franklin and Louis are working together to complete a mission. The plan is to deceive Teddy into believing that Louis is giving up Franklin to him. Later that night at her house, Louis gets on the phone with Teddy and lies that Franklin approached her about a loan. She agreed to give Franklin the money the next day, and during the exchange, she'll have her people grab him. Teddy pauses before instructing her to bring Franklin to a specific location once she has him. However, he warns her to only bring one member of her security team when they meet, or else Teddy will think he's being double-crossed. Once Louis hangs up the phone, Franklin and Gustavo appear, having clearly listened to the conversation. While the others have their fears about the plan, Franklin assures them that the plan will work as long as Gustavo shows up. If Gustavo doesn't, Franklin knows he's as good as dead. Tony, the lead special agent with the drug enforcement, speaks with Gustavo face to face. Tony informs Gustavo that a drug enforcement agent, Amanda, will accompany him when he meets the Colombians to pick up the cocaine because he has noted that Gustavo's behavior has been strange lately. Gustavo opposes the idea, but Tony says that he doesn't trust Gustavo with the plan. On the day of the drug exchange, Gustavo starts off his morning by saying goodbye to Xiomara. She has the money and passports, and before she leaves, he gives her a piece of paper with the number to an answering service that only she has. He says he'll check for messages weekly, but if he doesn't hear from her, he'll assume she made it safely to her destination. After hugging and saying goodbye, Gustavo walks out of the house and enters his car while being watched from a distance by Ruben, the KGB agent. Somewhere in the desert, Gustavo and Amanda meet with members of the Colombian drug cartel. These dealers aren't happy to see someone new, and they ask Gustavo who she is. He makes a risky joke about her being the drug enforcement, but the cartel thinks he's being sarcastic. Gustavo immediately follows up by saying Amanda is his cousin. This remark alarmed the agent, who later calls Tony about Gustavo's reckless behavior. Tony tells her that on her way back to Los Angeles, she should make a call about the whereabouts of Gustavo's family to see if something is going on. After dropping off Amanda, Gustavo once again finds himself paired with Tony. On the way to take the drugs to Teddy's warehouse, Gustavo stops by a payphone. The first call he makes is to Franklin's pager, which is a signal that Franklin and Louis are good to go with the next stage of their plan. However, when making that call, Tony looks on suspiciously. A very nervous Gustavo then gets on the phone to call Teddy. In the process of that, Amanda arrives and tells Tony that Gustavo's family is missing. Tony's feel played by Gustavo, which made him arrest Gustavo immediately without listening to his explanation. The drug enforcement boss tells Gustavo that his immunity deal is off the table, and that he'll plan the drugs by himself. Teddy tells Parissa that the CIA is no longer in his future because he is unable to hand over the millions of dollars. Teddy is unsure of what his goals are, but he is sure that he wants to be with Parissa. He proposed to her, and with joy, she answered yes. Franklin meets Louis and Scully in a warehouse somewhere else, where he urges them to beat him up. Franklin must look beaten and bloodied for this plan to seem plausible to Teddy. Scully refused to participate, while Louis passionately poured her frustrations on Franklin's face. Then, after receiving a page from Gustavo, Louis calls Teddy, who changes their original schedule and asks her to simply deliver Franklin to a faraway location rather than conducting an exchange. She agrees. Franklin was delivered to the location as agreed, but Teddy didn't pick up Franklin until it was dark. Franklin starts to panic as he realizes that Gustavo, who is his only chance of getting out alive, isn't there with Teddy. Teddy doesn't respond to Franklin's begging for forgiveness and mercy and knocks him out. After Gustavo is placed under arrest by the drug enforcement, the KGB agent, who's been seemingly following them all day, attacks the drug enforcement officers to break Gustavo free. Amanda instantly parks the truck and rushes to check on her boss's car because she was the one driving the vehicle that was in front of Tony and Gustavo. The KGB agent sneaks up on her and shoots her as she approaches the accident and tries to call for assistance. Gustavo is then dragged from the vehicle and brought to Teddy's warehouse. At the warehouse, Franklin is tied up with wire dangling from the ceiling around his neck. The only thing preventing his hanging is the barrel Teddy has placed beneath his feet. Right in front of Franklin, Teddy is preparing some chemicals to inject him with. Then, just as Teddy is about to inject Franklin with the chemicals, Gustavo busts through the doors with Ruben holding him at gunpoint. Ruben takes Teddy's guns and instructs Gustavo to handcuff Teddy. Teddy whispers to Gustavo that he has one more gun around his ankle, but Ruben catches on and instructs Gustavo to get the gun and hand it to him. Gustavo decides to attack Ruben. In the midst of their fight, Franklin kicked the barrel under his feet, and the young saint found himself grasping for air as he got hanged by the rope. Gustavo fortunately got the upper hand and knocked off Ruben. To Teddy's greatest surprise, Gustavo's next move was to save Franklin from hanging. Gustavo ignores Teddy and unties Franklin without hesitation, asking him what he wants to do next as Teddy watches in shock, with both hands handcuffed. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe to our channel.